I said on my radio show, and everybody quotes me on this, back in, I think it was 2014 or 2015, that in 5 years we'll be in a shooting war in the South China Sea. As a 22-year-old naval officer, I was on patrol in the South China Sea on an American destroyer, okay? And I said, where in the hell am I, right? You know, what is this place? Because every tanker in the world coming through the Straits of Malacca, from the Persian Gulf, you got every huge tanker, you got every boxcar. It's a super highway.
40% of China's energy needs come through the Strait of Malacca.
I think it's 1/3 of the world's trade, $5 trillion.
It is.
My point, this is a super high, when people say the South China Sea, here's what you got to understand. It's a super highway of commerce. The biggest ships in the world, 24/7, 365 days a year. What China did, and they came to the Rose Garden in 2015 and looked the American people and the American president lied to them. They built essentially 7 or 8 stationary aircraft carriers. They call them reefs, or these are stationary aircraft carriers. Mischief Reef, Scarborough Reef, all these. These reefs are basically aircraft carriers. And what they've done is they put fire control radar, search radars. They've got combat planes on them. I mean, these things could go
10,000-foot runways. So,
so the United States.
Why did Obama? So China said to us specifically when Obama was president, we will not militarize our islands in the South China Sea. We'll not go to the Spratlys. Everything we're building is just for research purposes. Why? How do we engage China now that we see that every single one of these islands, whether it's Fiery Cross or Mischief or the others, have 10,000-foot runways, anti-missile batteries on them, and all of the weapons that they said they never put there. And now they're landing nuclear bombers there. How do we engage them? Do we engage them over this, or do we just let them keep going?
When I got into the White House as chief strategist, okay, with Mike Flynn when we first got there on the National Security Council in the transition, I said the 3 things you got to do is devolve fighting capability to the combatant commanders. The White House was running the wars against ISIS.
So give it to Harry Harris.
Yeah. Well, no. In this regard, give it to the guys in CENTCOM and let them take on ISIS. You got to devolve, the power to fight wars and the ability to fight wars back to combatant commanders. Number 2, we got to figure out in this National Security Council thing the Obama appointees, how we're going to get our own people in there over time. Number 3, I said we have to go back and get every document related to Obama's pivot to Asia. I said, I want to see exactly what they looked at. And people should know, in the White House, I worked 7 days a week, 18 to 20 hours a day, okay? 50% of my time was on the pivot to Asia. Why Obama did it, what we were going to do to counter it.
It was Kurt Campbell's.
Kurt Campbell. Here's what I found. I thought it'd be a whole room full of documents. It was pretty thin. And what I found is that the United States itself, it was not really engaged institutionally against China. You had some great people, but there wasn't all forces that kind of thought through, hey, an economic plan or a war plan against China to engage in this economic war. In fact, what you saw, the entire pivot to Asia became, I think, putting a Marine brigade in Darwin, Australia, was basically the issue. So Harry Harris was a guy, everybody told me, Harry Harris is the man. So I got Harry Harris back, Admiral Harris back. I spent, a lot of time with him getting schooled on exactly what's going on. And the one thing I found that was shocking is that the South China Sea, when I was a young naval officer, we went through the South China Sea, guns up, radars up, everything moving. It's called free navigation. We did in international waters what we want to do, when we want to do it, because we're the United States Navy. Okay, we keep the sea lanes free. What I found out now is they got these reeds, everything like that. In China, we only go through in what's called safe navigation. You go through with your radars off, no fire control solutions, like a good little boy. Just kind of go, and you're basically asking their permission to go. The South
China, I was unaware.
The South China, they consider when they lost in the international court, China considers the South China Sea to be an internal sea to China.
I know.
They consider
the 9-dotted line of 1949
the 9-dotted line
is a joke.
They think it's a territorial sea.
I know.
They are not prepared. The first thing they'll tell you that the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of China is not to be questioned. Not to be questioned. And they consider that 9-dot line, the more people put it into documents, the more people put it on TV shows, the more people that re-infer that meme they want, because they believe that that's reality.
Yeah.
You ask me what's going to happen? The South China Sea, I said on my radio show 5 years ago, we're being a shooting war. The South China Sea, the situation in Qatar and the Persian Gulf and the South China Sea are the 2 greatest hotspots in the world for a global conflict to start, okay? Yeah. Not Korea. Korea is a vassal state of China. The whole Korean thing is nothing but a Chinese drama. okay? And President Trump's doing an amazing job on it. The South China Sea is a flashpoint, and you saw the other night, as a former naval officer, I'm telling you, those two ships, what you had an American, the USS
50
Decatur,
feet apart.
The USS Decatur was on patrol.
Yeah.
And you basically had a Chinese destroyer come up and play chicken with it, 50 feet apart. If those two ships had hit,
what would have happened?
First off, 200 or 300 sailors would have died. Okay, absolutely. If those two ships had hit at the speeds that they were going, the relative speeds they were going, we would have had a catastrophe. Okay, now I don't know what could have happened to the weapons or what could have happened to the fuel, but I'm telling you, at the speeds, what the Chinese did was reckless. And that was a challenge to us. Remember, what the Decatur did was go 12 miles from one of these reefs, okay? Now, what the Chinese say is within 15 miles is their territorial water. They said it was a violation of their sovereign territory for the United States Navy to come 12 miles off a reef that they built into the South China Sea. My recommendation is I think the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, who to me has been very even-handed with China and really, tried to build a relationship. I think you ought to give the Chinese 72 hours to take every radar, every offensive thing on a military, all the jets, everything out of the runways, everything off the islands. You get 72 hours to take it all off. And on the 72nd hour and 1 minute, the United States Navy is going to go in there and take it off for them. And then I think they ought to take those reefs and they ought to dismount them and turn them back into international waters. They say the United States is provocative by putting the United States Navy back into the South China Sea to keep the sea lanes open. I happen to believe where this relationship is going and the lack of a real response the Chinese are going to have, that they're going to try to do something provocative in the South China Sea to try to initiate a response. And I think the president ought to be proactive on this. I think you ought to tell them you get 72 hours. If you don't take it off, we're going to take it off for you. And then dare them to stop the United States Navy from going to do it.
Wait, you're saying go to a kinetic conflict in 72 hours in a minute.
I didn't say go to a kinetic conflict. What I said was
if we go to try to take this off, they're not going to let that happen.
Well, the international courts ruled that it was inappropriate for him to be there. Why don't we enforce that? The party at Davos, when she came and gave that great speech at Davos, they all jumped up about. They failed to say, you just mentioned, they looked the people of the United States in the eye and lied to them from the Rose Garden in 2015 with the President of the United States right next to them. Okay,
and no one called them on it.
And never called them on. And then you saw when the international courts came and said, "Hey, this is totally unacceptable. There's no argument for it. It's got to be undone." They just sat there. What they've sat there and said, "Hey, there's our territorial sea." Now I realize people saying, "Bannon, what kind of crazy whack job are you? It's somewhere and we don't even know where it is in the South China Sea. We're going to go to war." People have to understand the global economy, and I'm a nationalist, okay? But the health of the American economy is based on trade. Populists and economic nationalists are not anti-trade. They're anti this radical concept of free trade when you're trading with a totalitarian mercantilist society.
Right.
What Trump wants and what he said from day one is fair trade and reciprocity. Okay, reciprocity. And I think now we're going to get down to it with China. China's going to have to understand that Donald Trump is never going to back down on this.
Yeah.
Okay, he's a fair man. Okay, he's a decent man. He's tried to work with them, but the days of the United States being pushed around with this are over.
Well, let me ask you a provocative question then. If we were to go
How we get any more provocative? I said we're going to war in the South China Sea.
It's just the derivative of that. We're just going even more.
Along here
I'm actually just going the other. It's equally as provocative.
Okay.
What if we were to just take our 7th Fleet and go home?
Here's the thing: people have to remember. I think it's very important for people to remember that the United States is a Pacific power.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole development of this country, the Transcontinental Railroad, the whole West Coast. The West Coast, we are inextricably linked to the health of Asia's economy.
Well, Article 5 protections of Japan would be a real issue, but
yes. No, but
I say that because if we were to have to go to, let's say we were to get to the point where we either had to go to war or had to come home.
Coming home is not an option.
Not an option.
Not an option. The world would be would get to be an incredibly dark and dangerous place. You could have appeasement there. You could have a Munich, right? You could have people say, "Hey, let's just pull out. They built the islands. They're a rising naval power. It's really
we don't want to fight.
China. We don't want to. And look, listen, one of the cores about Trump's, it is non-interventionist. However, what America First stands for, national security, is where it's in the vital national security interest of the United States. It'll be in the vital national security interest of our local partners. That's what America First means. Trump is not going around the world looking for fights. He's trying to calm things down with Russia. He's trying to calm things down in Syria. He's trying to find a solution in Afghanistan. He's trying to find a solution in Korea. He's trying to find a solution in Venezuela. And your viewers should understand, Donald Trump didn't create any of this.
Yeah.
This is Richard Haas and all the fucking geniuses, okay, of the party at Davos. They're the ones that dumped Korea. They're the ones that dumped Afghanistan and Venezuela and China on his lap. What Trump is saying is that America First, our allies will be in their vital national security interests either. And you can go around and talk to Singapore and Thailand and Indonesia and Australia and ask them, hey, does an American naval presence in this neighborhood a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah. And they will tell you, no, it's a vital thing. We need America, and we need America here, because if we lose the South China Sea, we will lose any type of commerce, trying to control the whole place. And the Chinese understand that. That's why they're trying to push us out. And they're starting to already have the psychological warfare of exactly that. Hey, it's 12,000 miles away. It's really Asia. What are we involved here for? This is another debacle.
You're already hearing it.
This is another debacle like Iraq and Afghanistan. The United States is too. Look, I'm the biggest proponent of America First. South China Sea and the engagement with China is absolutely vital.
Interesting. Okay. Let's go to one other. I have two more questions for you. One is why has the U.S. not had a people management process in the U.S.? And what I mean by that is, you read the DIUX report, they call it declassified, or actually it never was classified, Defense Department report on the infiltration of China into our research universities and our labs.
And our weapons labs.
Weapons labs funded by DARPA, the Air Force. And why haven't we put into place a proper people management process?
I want you to go back, because I don't think people understand these reports. These reports are essentially declassified reports that showed that the 300,000 students that are here on student visas, right, and the 10,000 contractors that we have in the weapons labs that, up to, I think it's 2/3 could be intelligence assets, right? And some percentage are intelligence officers or agents.
And they're working in our labs.
They're working in our labs. This is
on weapons technology funded by our government.
This is political correctness and greed and avarice writ large. How did contractors, and let's call them out, Booz Allen and McKinsey, all these contractors, how did these contractors on these big government programs get so many Chinese nationals working into our weapons labs? Our weapons labs are at the cutting edge of national security. How did it happen? And so this has got to be done right away. I don't know why it's been a huge, I think, bone of contention inside the administration. The political correctness of it all. Stephen Miller, the Financial Times of London, leaked the other day that my colleague, Stephen Miller, who's a terrific young man, actually had the plan in place to get all 300,000 Chinese students out of the country, right? A way to cut the visas off right away. Not that we're going to execute on it, but it was even in the thinking, and obviously it got leaked in the times it goes around the State Department, et cetera.
Right.
Look at all the appeasers. I am so glad. I take great pride that someone like Susan Thornton is now, owns a farm up in Maine, because she was part of this kind of, rational accommodationist, this kind of softness in the Defense Department, in the State Department, in our intelligence services, that basically went along with what China wanted to do and looked the other way.
But how do we? So I'm not a proponent of throwing there are 340,000 students here, and I know you're not a proponent.
I'm not a proponent. Here's what I am a proponent of. I'm a proponent of, if they're intelligence assets, I want to know that. Okay.
Yes.
What Miller's program was is that, hey, if we can prove this, they got to go home. Okay.
But and I'm not even focused directly on China or India or anywhere specifically. But why can't we have a policy with the sovereignty and national security of our own country? Why can't we say, if it's a weapons program, you just need to be an American citizen? And maybe you should be a naturally born American citizen.
You're asking basic fundamental questions.
It's simple.
That actually, I think that's on the book, and they get waivers. I believe that technically, when you look in the details, that's actually the fact, and there's kind of waivers given to this, because people look the other way.
Huh. Okay, and so one more issue is the Confucius Institutes.
Yes.
The Confucius Institutes are on many of our colleges. They're funded directly by the PLA.
Yeah.
Why do our colleges allow Confucius Institutes on campus?
It would be like in China having something funded by the CIA that was directly,
or the Catholic Church,
or the Catholic Church, but not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has cut a deal that lets China. No, but this is a huge issue. Pope Francis just cut a deal that lets the atheists that run the regime in Beijing actually pick our bishops. So the Catholic Church would not be a good idea since they've already kowtowed. It would be equivalent of having CIA, DNI, have a student center that promoted CIA culture, right, to in China.
Yeah.
Okay, that ain't happening.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what's not happening? Because the Chinese say, hey, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen because that may affect our sovereignty.
Well, so give me a practical.
You got to unwind them.
How?
I think you just sit there and you got to shut them down.
Okay.
Right. I don't think there's any way.
Under what law?
I think. Hang on. This whole thing about people are saying, oh well, they're not that bad. They're pushing culture and they're helping students learn Mandarin. Hey, they're financed by the PLA.
They have server rooms in the Confucius Institutes. What the F's going on?
All this is going to be a shock to the American people. Here's why the American people don't know this, because nobody reports it. Has 60 Minutes ever gone and done a Confucius Institute?
They should.
Yeah, but they should have done it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The reason this is coming up is there are people now fed up with this. And that's why in this Trump movement, it was Donald Trump, and when he came to the government that changed it, that now other people and other voices are coming up, and you're seeing a real pushback. But to allow this to happen at our universities, let's be brutally frank. Why is it always Hudson Institute that's having Miles Kwok, or last night Mike Pence, Dr. Pillsbury's there? Why is it always Hudson Institute? Why is it not the other institutes having these kind of
well, because
conferences?
China has paid many of them.
The last thing that maybe I'll close on is when Li He, the economic strategist for President Xi, and I've had the opportunity to know him and build a little bit of a relationship. He's a very brilliant guy. When he came to do the major negotiation that didn't work out, I think it was in June of this past year, he came, and the very first day, he didn't go to the White House at first, he didn't go to Treasury at first. He shows up, and the very first day he spent on Capitol Hill with the quote-unquote free traders in the Republican Party. Remember, President Trump's, the greatest blowback he got on this was the Republicans.
Yeah.
It was the Republicans that went crazy. Oh, you got to do free trade, you got to do free trade. All the nomenclature that we've been using in regards to China has always been dismissed as, oh, that's just China, okay? And so all the nomenclature has just been happy talk. And the words don't really mean what they are. And it's people like yourself, it's people like Miles Kwok, it's people like Dr. Pillsbury that are now starting to question this. And I think you see this whole thing that from quote-unquote engagement to conference, what they're pitting us on now, the new thing is that engagement versus confrontation. And we're being painted as the war party, right? We're the crazy guys who want to go to war. No.
Right.
What we want to stop is an economic war that's been against the United States. And if you look at the group that's in the engagement process, all they've been in is being tapped along by China in these strategic economic dialogues that didn't go anywhere for 25 or 30 years and put us into the place where we were deindustrialized by a predatory power. And China's predatory capitalism is what they stand on. And so I think I couldn't be prouder that President Trump, and I think that speech, for people who have not seen that speech is going to go down in history as an inflection point, because Mike Pence yesterday, the Vice President of the United States, essentially threw down and said, hey, no more games. Yeah. We understand what you're doing. We understand what you're up to. We understand you have a full force of government against us, and we're going to counter that, and we're going to win.
I appreciate that. And, this goes back to when you pull into the Commerce Department, right above the entryway where you drive through, I don't know if you've seen this, there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin. It says, commerce must be fair and equitable. And I think that's where we need to be. I don't think we should be overly punitive. No. I don't think we should be combative. I think we should say we just need a fair shake at things. Right. And what you're saying is we haven't had one, and that's something we believe too. And the good news is I think in the last 6 months to a year, culminating with Pence's speech a couple of days, or actually a day ago, is finally the narrative's changing, despite all of the efforts from from those in China. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for sharing
having
this
me.
with
It was
us.
great.
It was really nice.
Undisclosed location.
Undisclosed location.
Yeah.
I mean, we're here with Miles.
You
so,
got to be undisclosed.
You know, we got to keep.
Except he's live streaming it constantly. So that's
I don't know who's more controversial, you or Miles, but we'll see soon.
Miles is a whole different league. I'm junior varsity compared to that.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.